Díomh agus fáte rómh with Q&A on Léon Jobh. So welcome to today's Q&A. Tom and Cho le Emma. Chiachfuil tú Emma?
Go bra, agus tú féin Sionainn?
Gahan wahar fad. And tonight we've got loads of interesting questions from around the world. And thanks to everyone who's tuning in live or who's watching back. Gaeltacht. Mar sin. Bólaí mis faoi. Let's give it a go. So let's start off with a question from Richard in Florida. Or why lesson can you leave, Emma?
Kinta. Okay, so Richard asks, I understand there are 3 dialects of Irish, one of which is Munster. In which of the 3 are the vowel sounds pronounced closest to the vowels in English? Siobhán, cad cheapan tú an bhfuil agat?
Unkished, Richard. So that's a great question there. So there are 3 main dialects in Irish: Munster, Connacht, and Ulster. So that's Munster, Gaeilge na Moon, Connacht, Gaeilge Chonacht, Ulster, Gaeilge Ulla. So the vowels sound a little different in each one of those dialects. Now, I would say that Ulster is the one in which the vowels sound a little bit more different than in the others, but in none of them do the vowels really sound like the vowels do in English. So the thing is, in Ulster, all right, the letter A or E, the first letter in the alphabet, does sound a little different, all right, and it tends to sound more like E, but I'm not an Ulster speaker, but it does sound a little different, whereas often in Irish, the first letter of the alphabet sounds more like O. So there's a bit of a difference there. But the vowels in Irish sound way more similar to the vowels in other European languages rather than English. So do you have anything to add there, Emma?
No, I totally agree with you. You can't. Sometimes people try and find the link between Irish and English vowels, and it's hard to say. I would agree with what you say, Sionainn. I'd say closer to on the continent for sure.
That's it. So if you know, I would say German or Spanish or any other European language, continental European language, you'll probably find the Irish vowels much easier. Whereas it seems like English is the odd one out in this case.
Yeah, Kinta.
Iontach fad. Mar sin bugam is rai. Let's move on to our next question. So our next question is from Yuki in Maryland in the United States. And she says, hello, myself and a couple of other Irish learners are interested in improving our Irish through doing dramatic readings of plays and scripts. Do you have any recommendations for plays in Irish? Also, do you have any recommendations for resources for finding plays or scripts in Irish? I've browsed through the drama section on choiligh.com and would love to know if there are more options out there. Thanks so much. Good Amila Mahagatain Yuki. So thanks for that question. So do you know of any good plays or places to find plays in Irish, Emma?
Yeah, so Keshtva, and I think it's a nice way to actually practice your language learning and, broaden your vocabulary, and also to be able to, express yourself even more through the drama or the play. I was actually the first thing I was thinking about is browsing through the section on Choiligh, and you can find a lot of very cost-effective books, low price and nice ones. But otherwise, I would say there's a couple of nice websites. Scoildrámaíocht.ie or .ie would be a nice one. There are scripts for plays in schools, but many levels I would say are covered within this. And the thing is, not all of them are Irish language originally, but rather translations. You find the English language classics translated as Gaeilge. But for plays maybe that would be originally written in Irish, there's a nice collection by Pádraig O'Conor, which is Barbara Rua agus Drámaí Eile, and I think that's actually available on Choiligh or one of the Irish bookshops sites. Chomhaile sin, maybe one that a lot of Irish people would be familiar with would be on Trial. Le Moraid ní Gráda, this one would be on the Leaving Cert certificate curriculum. So the final year exams curriculum in Ireland, a lot of people would be familiar with that. So you definitely find that online, and a lot of information on it as well, on what's going on, and because it's a bit of a higher level than some of the others. So that would be my recommendation. Siobhán, féin.
Tá cúpla molle lagam, so I have a few more recommendations, and just what Yuki mentioned there, and also what you mentioned there, that website, Emma, siúpaileabhar.com. So if anyone's watching there and wants to find out how to spell that, there you have siúpaileabhar.com. Also, links and notes from this Q&A will be published shortly afterwards, after we wrap up. So shortly afterwards on the blog post that's linked in the description box of this video. So you can just look at the description and follow in that blog post, and you'll see that it'll get updated later on today. Okay, so let's to answer your question there, Yuki, I would so there's a few other resources. So those are brilliant resources there you had, Emma, and also there's a few other websites. There's Gaeilge.com, and there on that website you'll find a list of plays on Leabharlann Drámaíochta, which is the drama library, and there are links and names and prices of the scripts. So I don't think they have any free scripts. I might be wrong though. It's worth looking into that more, but I've definitely seen links to the scripts to buy. And also you'll see there the other website, which is Playography na Gaeilge, and that is a database of Irish plays. So there is an English language section of Irish plays written in English, but this is the Irish language section, the ones for the plays that are as Gaeilge. So you can have a look into those. And again, these links will be in the blog post. But that is, as you were saying there, Emma, it's a brilliant way to practice your Irish. It's and just to use it, because it's not just practicing in that case, you're using Irish in that case. So it's a lovely way to go about it. And also scripts and the like are excellent for practicing spoken Irish, because of course they're supposed to be spoken. So it's a wonderful way. It's similar to how we host Bitesize Bio, which is a resource we have for the Grow members, where people can go on Zoom and read a script. It's not necessarily a drama, much simpler script though, about everyday topics. So it's the same concept, and then go on and speak in a natural, more natural conversation, but it's based on script. So it is again the same concept of using a script. So it's a wonderful way to learn. And practice and use your Irish, and just get inspiration for sentences, so that you can use them in your own everyday language, everyday conversations. So, all right. So, so our next question is from Damien. So, in Ontario, Canada. So, would you like to read that one aloud there, Emma?
Yeah, Kinta. Okay, so Damien asks, he says, "Dear Yiv, hoping you can Sherlock this for me." And he quotes capital BFAT. And he says, "This is a word I keep stumbling over lately. Sometimes it's in the music context, where it's a person's name or a nickname perhaps. And other times it's in comedy, like Des Bishop. And it gets a lot of laughs. I've no idea what it means or how it gets used. Cawer lom le the hol, gur magat." Siobhán,
Good morning, Tain Damien. I'm afraid I am as lost as you are. I have no idea. I asked around a bit, I googled, and nothing. I can't come across anything. I don't know if that's an acronym or if you mean that it sounds a word that sounds like that. But I'm afraid I can't help. Have you ever heard of anything like that, Emma?
I haven't. I actually did the same thing. I asked around and I had a look, and I even watched some Des Bishop videos actually this morning to see if I could come across even perhaps something that was pronounced similar, but unfortunately I couldn't. Maybe people in the comments could help out if they are familiar with this, or afterwards if they watch back. If anyone ever comes across it and help us out here, that would be very helpful. So Tobron or Damien fwy sin, but hopefully you'll come across it again.
Hopefully that mystery will be Sherlocked for you. Oh, excellent. Has there been any questions coming in the comments?
Yes, so I've been looking here. I saw a nice comment. It wasn't actually a question, but from Adam Kenny watching us on YouTube. Adam, he says, it's ironic, I barely passed Foundation Irish, but a few years later, I really want to learn it. It's always when you're not forced, you will learn it. And I think that's an interesting one. And I think Germagot us, commenting Yenov. And I do agree with you. A lot of people find their way somehow back to Irish. As you know, it's part of the curriculum in the Irish education system, and we are all learning it from, the ages of 4 or 5, and some people like it and some people don't. But I find that a lot of people that I know that didn't do too well in school, and perhaps they didn't not enjoy it in school, they just didn't excel at it at the time, that they find themselves coming back a few years later, 10, 15, 5 years later. And I think that's a nice point, Adam. So you're always welcome to join us on Bitesize, and to find the level that suits you and to work from there.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, and that's it. People have to, I suppose, separate the school subject from the language itself. I suppose when we think of it, the school subject for any language we did in English, for example, it was quite different. The difference between maybe Jane Austen and what you usually speak every day. So, you mightn't like Jane Austen, but doesn't mean you don't like English or you don't speak English. So it can be the same with Irish as well. So that's understandable, and but that's really, really good, Adam. That you're interested in learning Irish now, and that's brilliant stuff. Iontach ar fad, agus gneiri go Gaeilge, best of luck. Iontach ar fad. All right, so let's move on to our next question then. So this question comes here from Brian, and Brian says, I served in the US Marine Corps as a military working dog handler, so I'm always interested in service dogs. What are terms for these kinds of dogs? As Gaeilge. And Brian linked there to Irish therapy dogs, the Garda Dog Unit, Sionainn, Gaeilge and Garda Siohana, and he's looking there for the terms for these sort of dogs, these service dogs, and what they're called in Irish. So would you know the terms there, Emma, for the different types of service dogs?
I would indeed. So in actually one of the links that was linked by Brian, it was all as Gaeilge, and they did have a lot of vocab in there, but they didn't have the particular vocab as to what a service dog or a therapy dog as Gaeilge would be. So if you're looking for the word for a service dog, it would be madra service or service. Or then a therapy dog would be madra therape. So they would be obviously a service dog for people that would need it. And a therapy dog, then, often they're brought around to old folks' homes, to hospitals and that, as well as then used as personal therapy dogs also. And then just on the topic, you said you worked in the Marine Corps. There's a couple of other vocabs that you might be interested in. So a police dog would then be a Madra Polini. So the police, we have the Gardaí in Ireland, but a police dog then would be universal for Madra Polini. So you could say that for any police dog across the world. And Madra Bolíochta would be a sniffer dog, or perhaps a Madra Bolíochta Druggy, if you wanted to be very specific on what the dogs are sniffing. So a drug sniffer dog, and of course then you could add to that with, you know, explosive and so on and so forth, but we won't get into it. And then perhaps at the end, a Madra Cosanta would be then just your guard dog. So that could be your own personal guard dog as well. It doesn't have to be a police trained dog. It could be just your own German Shepherd that you've trained at home. So sin mo folklore duit.
Íntaach ar fad. Because I'd recommend as well, if you're looking for any more specific terms, Brian, I would recommend folklore.ie. There's also, you might find some more on there, and there's also chairma.ie, and I'll just add that to the screen as well, chairma.ie, and that's much more inclined towards those sort of professional terminology and more specific terminology. So you might find more specific terms, any specific terms you're looking for on that website there. So íntaach an ceist ar fad, brilliant question. Mar sin, Arashlin. So let's see, our Gaeilge ceist eile, so our next question here. And so, Emma, would you like to read this one? Right, I think Jan shall leave.
So, tagan an ceist seo ó Sionainn in Ottawa in Canada. And Sionainn says, "My name is Sionainn Cox. I've been researching, and I found my name in Irish is Sionainn Choiligh, daughter of the rooster. But for the life of me, I don't know the correct pronunciation. Phonetically, I have read McQuilty or McQuilly. Also, with the name Sionainn, could you break that down for me? Is it maybe Old River? What does it mean? Thank you." So, Hiwan, cad I cheapan tú faoi an tanam sin Cox or Nichan Choiligh?
Well, Guramahagat asked the ceist Sionainn, so thanks very much for your question. It's an excellent question. Always good to find out the Gaelic version of one's name. So Cox is the anglicised form of the surname Mach an Choiligh, or Mach an Choiligh, as Emma pronounced it there, so with the Pinton dialect. Mach an Choiligh or Mach an Choiligh. And it could also be the anglicised version of mhúinteoir. So it's possibly mhúinteoir as well. So it really does depend. Sometimes various different Irish Gaelic surnames have been anglicised to one word, and sometimes the same name in Irish, same surname in Irish, has been anglicised to various different anglicised versions. So, for example, mhúinteoir, I believe, has also been anglicised to woods, because cuile is a wood, coil. So possibly that's why it has been translated to woods as well. So woods and Cox. So, and also the thing is, Mach an Choiligh or Mach an Choiligh has also been anglicised as McQuilly, which, as you can hear, sounds quite similar to Mach an Choiligh. So that's it's close. It's close enough in pronunciation, but it wouldn't exactly be the phonetical pronunciation now. But it is close, so it'll be probably the nearest. It's definitely the nearest anglicised version when it comes to pronunciation. But Nichan Choiligh would indeed be the correct form of your name if that is your maiden name, Nichan Choiligh. So there's a different version of surnames for a woman, an unmarried woman, and then when the woman is married, if she takes her husband's surname, then she would have the married versions married version, like the wife's version of the surname. So there are two different types of surnames for women. So Nic an Choiligh. So it does seem to, this surname Nic an Choiligh or Mach an Choiligh does indeed seem to originate from the word Gaeilge. So Gaeilge is a rooster or a cockerel or a cock. So that's what cocks. So that's where the Anglicization seems to have come from. And so that's the idea there. So Nic an Choiligh, you do seem to be on the right track there. Now, when it comes to the name Sionainn, Sionainn seems to have originated from the river of the same name, which happens to also be the longest river in Ireland, and it's in English called the Shannon, the River Shannon, and Sionainn aun na Sionainne. So now that it's hard to tell what Sionainn actually means. It could mean Shannon, old river, could, or it could be somehow attached to, somehow originating from the name Sionainn, which an old goddess. So I'm not too sure where. I don't think anyone really knows what Sionainn originated from. So it could be Shannon, it could be Sionainn. It's quite unclear. But it's a lovely name all the same. So Sionainn, and there's also a town in County Clare called Sionainn, or the Shannon, and of course there's the airport. Mar sin ionntach ar fad agus an bhfuilíon thuaidh mí Agatsa faoi sin, Emma.
No, in Team Lat, Sionainn, you give a nice explanation there as well on the Sionainn River. It's a beautiful river. If anyone ever gets the chance to do a riverboat tour up the Shannon River, it's a lovely part of the country. So that would be my addition to an ceist sin ach mahu agus gur míl magat Shannon.
Ionntach ar fad. So our next question comes from John O'Neill, who's outside Glasgow in Scotland. And his question is, I have difficulty understanding spoken Irish. Can you help? Martin, will you multi agat Emma?
Yeah, well, ceist because I think you're not the only one, John, that sometimes has difficulty understanding spoken Irish. So there are a lot of different ways you could go about that. My córa, my advice would be to try and find videos or recordings of speakers that also include either subtitles on the videos or a script that might go with them. So as you listen, you can read at the same time, and then you can make that link between what you know when you read versus what comes out of someone's mouth or what you're hearing. So these can be found on many sites, but TG Cahir, which is the Irish language broadcaster, the TV channel here in Ireland, and that would definitely be available outside of Ireland as well. And another idea would be perhaps to listen to the news, whatever, watch or listen, and that way you would have, especially in world news, if you know the one that you choose does have world news involved, you'd have an idea of the context that they would be talking about. You know, maybe they're talking about a political thing or something that's going on in the world. You'd have the idea of the context at least. So it might be that bit easier to understand what's being said when you have that context. So yeah, that would be my idea. Another idea, and what I have done as a language learner, not only in Irish, but in other languages that I've learned, is try watching children's programs, because I know they might seem a bit silly if you think about it, but children's programs are directed towards children, of course. They speak ever so slightly slower. And also then the themes that you're dealing with on those programs wouldn't be as complicated and costa, as you'd say, as Gaeilge. So you'd have a better understanding of, you know, what's going on. And oftentimes in children's programs and in books as well, the vocabulary is quite repetitive, so you'll hear the same words over and over again. And I think that repetition can help you then understand a bit better, at least. So that would be my Choiligh. Siobhán, an bhfuil éonar le rá Agatsa faoi sin, bhfuil éon tuairmí?
Well, an Choiligh fadas on. So that's very good. That's brilliant advice there, Emma. I recommend basically the same thing. I'd be of the same opinion as yourself there. And yes, children's stuff is very good. It can seem a bit silly, but often the sentences in children's in children's stories, in particular, some of the children's programs, they're actually fairly normal in a sense. They are taken from everyday speech. Some of them, though, in some cartoons, I guess, are maybe the most useful. So it depends, but you can pick and take and all of that and see what works for you. But we do have a list of different resources which will be in the blog post linked in the description box, and they will link to various resources for children's stories that you can read and hear being read aloud and read along as you listen. But there are also some brilliant ones in regards news, as you mentioned there, Emma. So you've got Radio na Gaeltacht or rnag.ie, which you can find that online and listen to it anywhere in the world. If you want to watch the Irish language television channel, you've got TG Cahir. And a brilliant, recent enough resource, which just came about last year, I believe, is múinteoir, slow news, brought to you by Conor de Gaeilge in London. So the Conor de Gaeilge branch in London, England, and they have different people reading just like pretty much the headlines and just summaries of the news for that week. Just some of the headlines and summaries of the main stories around the world from that week, read slowly. And it also has a transcript of what's being read aloud in the description of each episode on SoundCloud. So it's not SoundCloud, I believe it's Spotify. Is it Spotify?
It
is. So on Spotify. So múinteoir, even if you just Google múinteoir, you'll get it. But I'll have the direct. We'll have the direct link there in the blog post. But it's a wonderful resource, and you can read along. And there's even a little glossary at the bottom. And then you've got VFX or VFX, and from Maynooth University. And that is another brilliant resource. And that what that involves is clips taken from the news and TG Cahir. And as well as that, it has little exercises for the different levels of Irish. To be honest, bun level is a little advanced. I think if it's not really bun level, I'd say it's not really the most basic level. But nevertheless, even if you're just starting out or you can't really handle the questions, never mind that, you can scroll to the last page of the PDF that's next to the clip on that website, the VFX website. And on the last page of the PDF, you will find the transcript. So you can listen and read along and try and read it aloud as well. So it's a brilliant resource for that, a brilliant resource. Though it would be more advanced than a múinteoir. But you hear different speakers, of course, because it is directly from TG Cahir. So you hear quicker speakers, slower speakers, news presenters, and just ordinary people being interviewed, like with vox pops and stuff like that. So it's a really good resource, and it's just little manageable clips as well. So and on different topics. So it's really good. So that's those are the ones I'd recommend, and I'll have a few more links as well in the blog post. Sin gubra. So are there any more interesting questions there in the comments? Let's see. And is there anything there? So we have there, okay, so we have a question here, and it's, what Gaeltacht would you recommend most? So would you have any recommendations for Gaeltacht there, Emma?
Well, I can be a bit maybe biased on where I'm from and the Gaeltachts that I grew up going to and I went to in my own time. I would definitely, number one, recommend Gaeltacht na Rinne, or Ring Gaeltacht, which is down in County Waterford, where I'm from. It's a lovely part of the world and part of the country, and the content there, the dialect, is quite rich. So I would definitely recommend that one, or as well anywhere over in the area of Kerry, Ondangan, Dingle, anywhere over there, Ballinert, all of the ones there, I can only recommend from my own experience. I haven't yet ventured up to any of the others in the north or the west, but I will. As soon as I can do that, I will. So they're my bias recommendations. Sionainn and Elaine, Agatsa.
Well, it's actually Jack or a bit client, so it's hard for me to be too biased because they're all lovely places, every Gaeltacht is, and I think it's really up to yourself and up to if you've chosen a specific dialect. I think it's up to the specific dialect. It's up to you according to the specific dialect you've chosen, or perhaps it's because of your ancestry or whatever, family ties. But I'd say I'd really recommend all and every one of them. But there are opportunities to speak Irish in each and every one of them. But the Connacht Gaeltacht, I suppose, would be my specific biased recommendations. It's lovely to go out to Connemara and get into the heart of it and go about there and drop into shops and pubs and stuff and speak Irish to the people there. And it's nice to walk by the sea and everything and go from island to island too. So it's a nice experience. And of course I don't have as much of experience now with the Donegal Gaeltacht, but I'm sure they're wonderful as well, as I've heard the many very good, I suppose, recommendations of those as well. And I've heard of people having a very nice time there. And of course, the Gaeltacht in Corcoran, Gaeltacht Corcoran in Kerry, Cundechiri is lovely as well. And I suppose that's a bit of another biased one for me as well. But it's they're all wonderful, to be honest. And it's lovely, the differences in dialect in each and every Gaeltacht area, and it's so rich. And even to go to any place, to go anywhere even that's not maybe officially Gaeltacht, but where the local community have done their best to found local resources and local facilities that function through Irish. You have, of course, for example, An Siúpla Hráid Archar on Harcourt Street in Dublin, and it's like a little Gaeltacht in and of itself. You can go into that bookshop and speak Irish and find all the books in Irish you'd ever want and be served through Irish. It's lovely. And also you could go to Belfast, Belfarishta, and you've got an Chulturlan, and you've got an Drogheda, and you've got so many different places there to speak Irish and hear Irish, and it's wonderful that there are also these more urban hubs of Irish language hubs, you could think of it. Of course, there's more than those there as well. They're in Cork and Derry, I believe, too. So it's great to have these. So, but I'd recommend anywhere that Irish is spoken, I'd recommend that myself. So there you go. So let's get back to our questions then. I think we've got only one more. Yes, just one more question from those that were sent in to us beforehand. So let's see then. So would you like to read this one aloud, Emma?
Kinta, yeah. So Daniel from Sasna, which is one of our Grow members. So gur maith Daniel as an cheist seo. And this is an interesting one and maybe a bit more advanced for some people, but I like it. So he says that I understand that one can use, quote, tá mé imo as an alternative to is may, or is whatever may. For example, one could say tá mé imo mhúinteoir rather than is múinteoir mé. Is there any difference in meaning between the two sentences, implicit or otherwise? And is there any limit to when one can replace one kind of sentence with the other? Would it be a correct Irish to say, for instance, tá mé imálínteoir navsbloch, or for that matter, tá sé ina alínteoir navsbloch? Gur míle maith agaibh as 8 gach voor ober agus voor cower ag Bitesize. So gur míle maith agaibh Daniel, ceist úntoch é sin, and I suppose I can try and give my input on it firstly and see maybe what Sionainn thinks. But I know myself that this is maybe a question of crunis itself. So being quite, it's quite a minute thing in grammar, but you can for sure say both. And from my knowledge and what I've learned is that there is a slight difference. Now, the slight difference there can be maybe contested, and it won't be said by every native speaker in Irish. They won't agree. But when you use that form, tá mé imo mhúinteoir, it implies that it isn't permanent. And another way that I could maybe give that as an example, or give another example, would be the idea of I am living. So tá mé imo choiligh versus choiligh. So tá mé imo choiligh Gaeltacht, I'm living in Dublin. The idea of that versus choiligh beidir sa rank would be the idea that you're living in France maybe just for 6 months. So tá mé imo choiligh sa rank, or choiligh sa rank ar feadh séimhí gach saora. So this idea of it being permanent and being then not permanent, I suppose, it would be very implied there. I have myself used ismú tá mé imo mhúinteoir sa ghearmáin, and there's never been a problem. But if you really want to get into the nitty gritty of it, the idea of that tá mé imo could be, especially when you're talking about an idea of a job or an occupation, it would be slightly more you're part-time doing it. Ein input on son, Sionainn? It's a difficult one. It's a hard one.
So I think that was a very good explanation there, Emma. How I would describe it is, I don't think I've actually read ever anything about this, but I've always heard that is the best way to form a sentence if you can. If you can. So I know that this is like the usually the best if you can thing, because sometimes tá is the best way to start a sentence, definitely. So it depends. But if a sentence has a noun in it, like is múinteoir mé, I'm a teacher, but if it was an adjective like I'm small or I'm tired, you would say tá mé beag, tá mé torseach. But is múinteoir mé, I'm a teacher. So that's generally like the rule of thumb kind of thing. Now you can say tá mé múinteoir, and it's very, very common to hear tá mé múinteoir and other such sentences. But that being said, is múinteoir mé, it's very direct and it's very precise. Tá mé múinteoir, it's more I would say it's common, very common in speech, but it is a bit of a roundabout way of things. So I myself, I don't see much reason to say tá mé múinteoir when you can say it's múinteoir me. And so I guess that's the thing. When it comes to the differences, I suppose the only difference really that I could think of is múinteoir me is more precise, to the point. Of course, people would understand tá mé múinteoir also means I am a teacher, but there is tá mé múinteoir. Yeah, it still means I am a teacher, but it's just this múinteoir me, it just hits harder, kind of. It's just more precise, just more to the point. That's really it. I don't, to my knowledge anyway, there isn't any greater, deeper distinction between the two. But it's just why have the longer sentence when you can have the shorter one, basically. So that's pretty much it. That's my understanding of it. Ach an Ceistar Daniel. And I believe Daniel also had a question in the comments there. This was it. What would you say are some of the most important Irish language texts, political, literary or otherwise, in modern Irish history, particularly since the late 18th century? So do any come to mind there, Emma?
I was trying to think and nothing comes to mind. I will say that I'm not an expert in literature, especially some of the older literature. I would suggest looking up that of around the time from the Gaelic revival. There's a lot come from there, but off the top of my head, I unfortunately can't think of anything. Perhaps afterwards we can add a link or two, but perhaps yourself, one on Valéanrod or the Sionainn agat.
The first two that come to mind, especially from that period of like the late 18th century, would be the two, I suppose, possibly, I suppose it's debatable, but like the major literary pieces would probably be Cuoine Arthaí Líre by Eileen Rú ní Chonal. And that would be from about that time. And I'll just put that on the screen there, what that looks like. And T.G. Cahir actually did a little documentary on this. So this is actually a poem, and it's written by Arthaí Líre's wife. So it's quite a deep love poem, but it is actually very famous and major in the Irish language, Cuoine Arthaí Líre. And also you've got, so that's possibly one of the most famous from that time period. You also have then you would have, I suppose another famous one would be actually Cuairt Bhean, which is another poem, and Cuairt Bhean by Brian Merriman, also from the same time period. So I'll just pop that up there as well. So these would be translated to English as well, so you can see the English translations also. So the Midnight Court, you could translate this as, whereas Cuoine Arthaí Líre would be Arthaí Líre's I suppose elegy or lament, or the lament, yeah. So that's it. And so those would be from that period of time. I suppose the next, I suppose the most famous novel in Irish would be Sionainn by An Tathair Peadar Líre or Líre, and that's from 1907. So that's a very famous novel in Irish. So that's a very famous one. But there are so many things in Irish that are quite famous and major, but Sionainn is definitely one of the major early Irish novels. It's 1907. There's another one as well that had come to mind there, and I think it's
I'm just reading in the comments there, Mashgale Féin as well by An Tahar Padar Freshen. So yeah, An Tahar Padar is definitely one to watch if you are interested in that.
That's it. That would be major. That's it. That would be a major, another major literary piece, and of course he was very much a major literary figure. But there are so many others as well. Oh, there's I'm trying to think now of another. You'd have what is he earlier? You'd have, let's see now, he would be more of a, I suppose, a historian, I guess, Shathrún Céitinn, but he'd be earlier, he'd be 17th century, Shathrún Céitinn, but he'd be earlier, but Geoffrey Keating in English. He'd be a 17th century historian from Tipperary, and he's another famous literary figure when it comes to Irish. So that's another major figure there. So I just get that up there. So Shathrún Céitinn, that's his name, or Geoffrey Keating. So there are so many. There are just so many, and those are the early enough ones. Of course, then an author there you mentioned earlier on, Emma, Pádraig Ó Conairí, very famous Irish author. Pádraig Ó Conairí, especially for his short stories. And I was thinking as well, that's it, Craine Killa.
Yeah, of course. One of the more famous ones as well, yeah, of course.
That's it. But there's just so many, like we'd be here the whole night, to be honest. There's just so many major ones, and there's so many. But what I'll do is I'll make a list of a few more as well as we think of them. And there's some, like, I suppose it would be a good goal if someone has more advanced Irish, especially good goal to read the major classics, especially in more modern Irish, let's say in the Irish of the last century, especially, because it would just be easier to read naturally. But that being said, Irish hasn't changed that dramatically over the centuries either, so you'd be well able to deal with the older Irish as well, as maybe if it's in a more maybe palatable spelling, a more modernised spelling. But yeah, so it's there's just so much Irish literature out there as Gaeilge. Mar sin ein kistillen, sin, so was there any others there? And Gaeltacht, that's another famous book in Irish.
Flann O'Brien, yeah.
Yeah, that's it. And Sionainn, agus Gobra. So let's see now. So there's talk there of the rolled R or Slender R, and it's that really that's a good comment there, because someone had asked about that, about the rolled R or the Slender R in Irish, as it's more precisely called, an R Choiligh. And as it said there, you hear it often more in older recordings. Maybe the R can sound a bit different in all the recordings of Irish. So do you have any thoughts on that there, Emma?
Yeah, I think it's something that many people that have started learning modern Irish speakers now, and it seems to get lost, that idea of at the end, like an I'm should, that at the end. It can be found, it depends on the dialect as well. There's no standard spoken Irish. There's a standard written Irish, of course, but there's no standard spoken. So the fact that, in some dialects, the rolled or in or Choiligh or Slender R would be a lot more noticeable than in other dialects. I know myself, I try to do it, but I sometimes forget that, or it just, it doesn't come out as often, but it would definitely be there in older Irish recordings rather than, it still exists, but I would say that you kind of have to listen a bit harder for it, depending on what dialect or who you're listening to speak. Cad happened to Siobhán.
Aontim let Emma. I agree, and I know Owen did a video on that as well. And I suppose it is really a neglected part of Irish pronunciation, but it does depend on dialect. That is true. It does depend on dialect. And it's not necessarily, I guess, a rolled R. It can kind of sound like it sometimes, depending on the speaker, but I know, I suppose, strictly not a rolled R. But I suppose a good way of practicing it is the difference between saying amen and min in Irish, fair and fear. So you can kind of hear it there, fear. It's not, I'm not rolling it as like fear. I'm not doing that either. So there's, and it does depend, like, that's just the way I say it, not necessarily that's not necessarily the best way to say it, but there are different ways of pronouncing these words. So there is a difference, and you can hear it, like what you said there about an emshire.
Yeah, it's almost like I wouldn't say it's in a rolled R. I'd say it's almost, now take this with a pinch of salt, but it's almost like a D at the end. I'm sure, as if you're kind of, it's definitely up there in the front of your mouth. I'm sure, and your tongue is almost hitting the back of your teeth, but also like midway between the roof of your mouth and the back of your teeth. Now, I know that's very, very specific, but if you listen out and think of it more like a soft D at the end, rather than a rolled R, I think that might make it a bit easier, a bit better to understand, because rolling the R, it wouldn't really happen, at all. A more flattened is that kind of idea of your mouth. Practice moving your mouth that way and see how you go.
What I just say to people is to just emphasize the R more when it's coil, when it's slender, because often, like with fair, you're not really, you are saying the R, but you're not emphasizing it as much as in fear. There you actually hear the ear, you hear it. It's very much an R sound. So that's one part of it. But there is there has been quite a bit written about this as well. So I'll add notes as well in the blog post on that, so that you can find out more about the slender R and what it is exactly. And of course, we link to Owen's video as well. All right. So let's see now. Oh, there's another great recommendation there of Fila, a poet in Irish, Antoine O'Raftery. So definitely a major poet in Irish. And lots of major literary works there, and literary figures this evening. All right. Will we take one more question there, Emma?
Yeah, I think we've time.
All right. So we have here, you just used Agatsa. What is the difference between using agus tú féin or agus tú féin and agus Agatsa? What would you say to that, Emma? Any thoughts?
Yeah, so Keshva, good you noticed it anyway, you're listening. So Agatsa is, first of all, the emphatic form of agut, so, and you, and at you. So egg there is the preposition at, and agut is at you. Now that doesn't make much sense when you say that in English, but so tá madra agum, I have a dog, and then I would say to Siobhán, an bhfuil madra agutsa, do you have a dog? So that agutsa there, that s at the end, is the emphatic form, putting emphasis on the do you have a dog. So you could say that, and then you have agus tú féin, which is, I suppose, another emphasis, but not the emphatic form. It just, and yourself. Yeah, so tú féin, mé féin is myself, tú féin is yourself. So it kind of depends on what sentence you'd use each in. So do you have a dog? Tá madra agam, an bhfuil madra Agatsa. And then and yourself, agus tú féin. You can ask that way, and then they would then know that you're putting emphasis on you. Especially it's useful if you're in a group of more than two often, you know, and you, especially when you're asking the same question more than once. Oftentimes, you know, you don't want to just say an bhfuil madra agat, an bhfuil madra agat, an bhfuil madra agat. You put in the Agatsa there, and it adds a bit of emphasis into how you speak.
That's a very good explanation. That's it. And agus tú féin is interchangeable pretty much with agus tusa. So especially like when someone asks you how you are, how are you? And you might say Tá gama. And if you want to return it, instead of like asking the question again, you might ask Tá gama or magat agus tú féin. And you are agus tusa. So often if you're returning a question kind of thing, you might say that. But Agatsa, it is more in the sense of having usually. So you mightn't use it. It wouldn't be exactly interchangeable in that context. But it's, you're saying there, Emma, if you have multiple people and it's like Tá catagam and will catagat and then the third person maybe it'd be will Agatsa, and then it might in the fourth when it's the fourth person so agus turn it might be agus tú féin. So it could be that way, all right. And that's the thing about Irish. Irish doesn't like copycat sort of thing or parroting anything. Irish likes to change things up very much, so that's why we have so many various versions of these things. It's a cultural thing, I guess. Ionta chur fad. So let's see then. So that's a great. Those are all great questions. So I guess we'll have to call it a night, though. So we should go hauling our fad of a Choiligh. It was lovely to be talking to you all, and atomic soul le war gishtana on kid ur ella. So I'm looking forward to your questions next time, and it was a very enjoyable evening when we answered us.
Míle maith Siobhán, bhí go húntaach, and thanks to everybody who sent in questions, who are in the comments posting questions, and also to those who are answering questions in the comments as well. You help each other out, and it's greatly appreciated by all. And tá mig tnú leis an gcéad uair eile, and if you have any follow-up questions, you can still, you know, battle them out in the comments under this video afterwards. So gur míle maith agaibh, gur maith
agus gur maith Emma.
Gur maith.
Martin, slán go fólín, le muid líomh go luú a rís. Slán tamil.
Slán.
Slán.